Bagi yang beragama Islam, yang bukan beragama Islam boleh baca doa mengikut kepercayaan agama masing-masing. Al-Fatihah. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Ya. All right, once again, good morning, everyone. To all participants, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the webinar Kecemerlangan Akademik, siri yang ketiga. This is the third series of our webinar for this year. And today we are indeed honored and privileged to have with us Associate Professor, Technologist Dr. Aishah Abu Bakar, who will share with us her expertise and experiences on digital assessment, which is the topic of discussion for today. So as we all know, teaching and learning is becoming more personalized to each learners, and technology provides an opportunity for an assessment to be integrated into the learning process with a focus on problem solving and creation of new knowledge applied to real-world situations. But the impact of globalization and digital technology are changing rapidly, especially on the expectations of our learners, which is our students. And therefore, it is important for us to ensure the qualifications continue to remain robust and be credible and yet respond to rapidly changing times. Now, a bit of background of our speaker. Dr. Aishah Abu Bakar is an associate professor at the Faculty of Civil Engineering Technology, University Malaysia Pahang, di Pahang. So apart from her research work in geotechnical engineering, she was also actively involved in curriculum development and quality assurance, which further led her being the recipient of the National Teaching Award for the engineering cluster in the first National Academy Award 2006 by the Ministry of Higher Education. Maksudnya Prof ni pemenang anugerah akademik negara lah, the first AAN back in 2006 for anugerah pengajaran, right? And her exposure to good practices in teaching and learning was due to her active involvement in the curriculum development at program and institutional level, including special master's program under the Malaysian University Consortium for Environment and Development, Industry and Urban Areas, and also the Danish University Consortium projects. Apart from that, she is also an expert panel and contributor to the publication of national guidelines to good practices, curriculum design and delivery, or CDD, by the MQA, Malaysian Qualification Agency. Her involvement in higher education research in the area of assessment in higher education has led her being appointed as the University Assessment Committee member under the Malaysian Qualification Agency Accreditation Group Area 3 Assessment of Students. Now, Prof. Aishah has also been seconded twice with the MOHE, Ministry of Higher Education, and during her time there, several policies are being developed and implemented with her direct contributions, which includes Malaysia English Assessment, Flexible Education, Higher Education Curriculum 4.0, 2U2I, Mata Pelajaran Umum 2.0, TVET Teacher Standard, and ASEAN Student Mobility, and also Transnational Education. Quite a very excellent CV, Prof. So we are very delighted to have you with us today, Prof, to share your expertise on way forward in digital assessment. So without any further delays, I would like to invite Professor Aishah to deliver her talk. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Amer. Dr. Amer Azlan, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Amer, for contacting me. And also I would like to thank basically your pengarah, Dr. Dennis Andrew, for agreeing to have me today. I think first of all, I would like to apologize for a slight delay. And I do hope that Amer has already told everyone that we're going to have a slight delay in our session today. And I think as agreeable, the session will be around 2 to 3 hours. But then again, I suppose we are flexible and we are free to stop at any time if you feel that is necessary for us to discuss matters that is so important and pertaining to you. So once again, thank you so much to UMS and also for all participants that can join us today. So let me put up my slides. Actually, when I was invited for this particular session, I was given the flexibility to actually suggest what are the topics that I think that I would like to share with all of you today. And I think I've given two topics. One is actually way forward to digital exam, which the topic that we would like to talk about today. And I think another one, what is it, Amer? Another one that I suggested? Is it about the curriculum, something to do with the curriculum? What was our cadangan masa mula-mula dulu ya? Ada dua kan? Ada dua topik. Saya rasa. Sekejap ya. Oh, satu lagi topik is about the scholarship in assessment.
Scholarship in assessment, yeah.
Scholarship in assessment. So whichever topic, if you look very carefully, those two topics that I propose are actually around the area of assessment. Actually, assessment is something that is very close to my heart. And the reason being, I think for those who are already involved in the quality assurance, I think you know that regardless how good we are in our teaching and learning pedagogy or methodology, at the end of the day, the quality is actually controlled by assessment. So basically, assessment, if we read any educational theory or any educational book, assessment is actually the gatekeeper to quality in education. And in fact, I would say that assessment is actually the gatekeeper of anything that we do, because for example, in the industry, in the manufacturing sector, or even in a social science sector, in whatever sector, if we want to know whether or not we have done something correctly, efficiently, to a certain extent, we really have to take care or look after the assessment. One thing about assessment, the reason why I actually suggested scholarship of assessment, because there's not much of awareness of the need for scholarship in assessment in Malaysia, but this is not actually unique in Malaysia. It also happened elsewhere throughout the world. So there is, to be honest with you, I have been in Helsinki in 2019 after I finished my secondment at the Ministry of Higher Education, and I actually joined one of the workshop and also seminar with the so-called elite group of assessment in higher education, and they consist of people like David Bout. If you read a journal paper on assessment in higher education, these are all big names that have done a lot of research on assessment in higher education. And these people, this elite group of people, they are the one who really drive into the scholarship assessment. The reason being, if we don't take care of assessment, I don't think we can talk about how are we going to improve our teaching and learning, what need improvement, and especially nowadays after the pandemic, the question is even bigger, and the question is how. If I were to look at my practice, I'm not trying to say anybody else practices, because typically in the scholarship of teaching and learning or in the scholarship of assessment, we normally not looking outside. We're not trying to tell people what to do or trying to actually get people to do this and that, but rather we normally pose questions to ourselves. So for example, in my case, I pose question to myself, after the pandemic, how will assessment evolve? In what way digitalization that is currently going on, especially in Malaysia and elsewhere, will have an impact to how I assess my student. Therefore, in what way I will need to change my teaching. And I think we are all in Malaysia are very well versed on outcome-based education. I think we are all very aware of constructive alignment. And I think when we talk about constructive alignment, we are all expert already, where if you want to take care of your constructive alignment, the first thing that you need to do is to make sure that you write clear learning outcome, and secondly, choose appropriate assessment method that can measure the learning outcome. You see, this the second steps in the constructive alignment in the outcome-based education is always about taking care of your assessment. So when we take care of our assessment, then only we prepare our students how to be ready for the assessment that we have chose to measure the learning outcome. So that is basically the narrative of what constructive alignment is all about. So we can see that the teaching and learning methodology, whether we and how we support students is very and highly depending on the assessment and the type of assessment that we chose to measure the learning outcome. So I would like to begin with that premise before I put up my slide. So I have to be brave to put up my slide now. Let me share my screen. Okay. Right. Okay. Is it possible for you to see my screen now? Is everybody okay?
All clear, Prof.
All clear. Right. I would like to invite any one of you to chip in and also just unmute your mic freely, because this session is for us and it is not for me to teach or anything. But to be honest with you, when I proposed this topic, I prefer for us to have a discourse. So when we talk about academic discourse, we share our struggle and we share our methods, because not necessarily what I'm going to share with you is something suits you or is something that is so-called way forward. Maybe you have a much better way in doing that. So I highly welcome for us to share our experiences from here on, right? To begin with, actually I have a much bigger things to share with you, but there is a little bit of hiccups, which is on my fault. So I will try my best to cover what we're supposed to cover. So first of all, I think the first part of my session of our session today is trying to understand examination, and the second part we are trying to understand other type of assessment than examination. I think these are the two parts of assessment that I would like to clarify before we can even talk about way forward in digital assessment. Because when we talk about digital assessment, there are two parts. One is the assessment, and another part is actually the how we digitalize our assessment. There is actually a discussion about whether or not what we are currently doing is actually digitalization of assessment, or whether we are only digitizing our assessment. Are we okay with all these terms? Let me check.
Can you repeat that again, Prof?
Ada base, boleh tak saya cakap bahasa Melayu sikit-sikit?
Boleh, no problem.
Strictly in
Pakai
English.
santai je.
All right. If there's no international participant, then I suppose saya boleh dimaafkan untuk cakap sedikit bahasa Melayu. So basically,
I think we have some international.
okay. So if we have international participant, then I will stick to English, right? So uh, let me pose a problem or a question here. You can see here, this is the normal setting of examination, and this is actually UMP exam hall. And you can see that we put students all in one room, we observe them, everybody get the same questions, same paper, they will have to complete on the same time, and they're strictly being observed. To all this to make sure that they don't cheat, and basically whatever that they produce is actually from their own understanding and knowledge, right? When we actually have to face a situation for the last 2 years, in fact, this is our third year now, and currently we are still doing it, when we have to put up with the distance learning, right? When we talk about remote distance learning, we have to get our students to sit the typical examination online. We get them to do their assignment online. And basically, after they have done online, what do you normally do? You normally ask your students to take a picture of their answer script, or use a cam scanner and then upload onto the Moodle platform. Is that what you're doing? Because that is what I'm doing. Is that normal to you? Or UMS actually have a much much advanced system that you have developed so far? One of you said that yes. So basically, when that's pretty normal. Thank you, Trixie. So basically, when we talk about students actually having to answer the exam question like they normally sit in this exam hall, the only difference is that they're being observed through a particular channel chosen by the lecturers, for example, either using the MS Teams or using the Zoom or Google Meet, and then they have to scan their answer script and then upload onto the platform, whatever learning management platform, be it Moodle or be it Google Classroom or whatever it is. That is only what we call digitizing the assessment, right? We are not yet putting our step, our kaki, okay, into what we call digital assessment. So digital assessment is more than that. So that is the reason why I choose the topic as way forward. So what we're trying to do here is I would like to bring you step by steps. So we will discuss about examination and also a little bit on alternative assessment that we currently we currently move into digitizing the assessment, and what it will look like if we actually digitalizing the assessment. Okay, digitizing and digitalizing is slightly different. So obviously, before we can go into digital assessment, we need to get ourselves familiar with digitizing assessment first. So honestly, digitizing assessment is something that we are all quite familiar with, because we have been, to a certain extent, we have been experiencing it and practicing it for the last 2 years. So this is basically, but before we go into digitalizing assessment, let's move on and talk about the online, the premise that we are very familiar with, the online examination and also online assessment first, right? Then we will basically step up into how are we going to face, or what are the challenges if we were to do the so-called digital assessment. Right. So This is one of the, as I mentioned, David Boud is one of the scholar in assessment, and he said that students can escape from effect of poor teaching, but they cannot escape from the effect of poor assessment. And the assessment is the one that we actually design and we take care of. So the first part of this session, I would like us to examine examination first, because as I mentioned, there are two parts. One is we would like to examine examination, online examination, and then I will bring you up to the next level. How can we design examination questions so that it fit into digital examination, right? So is it okay? Are you following my argument? So we're going to look at examination. We're going to look at how can we change our examination questions so that it can fit into the online examination before we can prepare ourselves into digital examination environment, right? Because if I straight away jump into digital assessment or digital examination, I think people will get lost. So I would like to take the first part to basically walk you through what it's like to deal with online examination and how do we take care of online examination before we are ready for digital exam. So if we look at examination, as I mentioned, the feature of examination makes a lot of us and also students feel very nervous. I don't know about you, but as a lecturer, whenever my student need to sit for the exam, I'm actually quite nervous because sometimes I don't know, because it is just a one-off, so I don't know whether my students are ready, and I don't know whether my questions are clear. Sometimes I thought that my questions are clear, but they are not well understood by students. Sometimes there are parameters missing where we need to do correction there and there. Sometimes our answer script does not, is not totally correct. There's a lot of things that can go wrong on the so-called examination session. And because of that, we can see that every year, this is the posters from UMP. Whenever that students need to sit for examination, both the administrators and also students really pray very hard for them to do well in examination. So we can see how examination created fear and created the so-called threatening environment to quite a lot of people. And I think we are all aware that the Ministry of Education Malaysia, MOE, not MOHE, we are with MOHE, Ministry of Higher Education, but Ministry of Education has announced that they took away the PT3 kan? Betul ke? PT3? They are taking away the PT3 from the system daripada sekolah menengah. And in fact, thank you. So my daughter is also a teacher at the secondary school, and she actually had a chat with me about this, and she said that all school teachers are now currently thinking that if there's no PT3, does that mean that there is no summative assessment? There's one thing about assessment, and actually the best thing for us to approach this session is to clarify some of the so-called terms in assessment. Because one thing about assessment, it is quite technical. Before we can even talk about digital assessment, we need to clarify some of the terms that sometimes we use it very loosely. First of all, I think I would like to clarify about formative summative assessment, and also examination. So when we talk about assessment, okay, how do we define assessment, by the way? Anybody like to offer your answer? Maybe in the chat. Maybe Amer can help me to look at the chat because I cannot see anybody now, actually. Anybody like to share with me? because these are all jargon in assessment, and I'm sure UMS have done very well under the Teaching and Learning Center that you're all been trained on assessment. So basically, there's a lot of jargon like assessment, examination, you have alternative assessment, you have summative formative, you have continuous assessment, right? So I think let us take 1 or 2 minutes to clarify the things, right? Basically, assessment came from the word assidia. So when we talk about assidia, we are talking about this is when the teacher actually sit with the learner, right? And the reason for the teacher to sit with the learner is actually to basically to find out or to help the learner in order to achieve the stated learning outcome. So that is what is the purpose of assessment. So there's a lot of methods, tools that we can use to assess students, and it can be both summative and also formative assessment, right? With the removal of PT3, this is how I explained to my daughter, we are only removing the examination. Examination is one of the summative assessment. There are many summative assessment that we are talking about. Let me conteng a little bit, if I can. All right. Let me take a pen. Okay, right. So if you can give me a minute for me to get myself familiar with the, because I very seldom use WebEx, so I need to now erase this. Okay. So basically, when we talk about assessment, it consists a range of things. It can be formative, it can be summative. PT3 is one of the summative assessment. And I think we are all aware throughout the semester, and now it's too small. Let me tools. Why is it the whole thing smooth? I need to write. Kami boleh bantu saya tak?
We can see your drawing, but it's a bit lagging, I think.
Tapi dia bergerak as I
Yeah.
Dia bergerak bila saya gerakkan pen saya. Saya pilih pen tools kan, betul kan?
Tak nampak pen lah, Prof. On our screen now, we can see the posters still. I'm not sure if you're.
I am actually writing on the posters, but I cannot get my pen. Tapi saya tak boleh dapat pen saya sebenarnya.
I can see the blue drawing there.
Tapi dia tak, dia bergerak. So I cannot write actually. Start annotate. So saya lukis kat situ. Dia tak lekat. The pen does not tak lekat untuk saya.
Maybe you want to use the PowerPoint pointer?
Okay, let me okay. Okay, better. Thank you so much for the suggestion. Okay, Going back to the examination as one of the summative, right? So basically, normally we have our final exam here, and then we have several continuous assessment here that we throw throughout the 14 weeks. So these are all, although we call it continuous assessment, they are not formative, they are indeed summative assessment, right? They are indeed summative. Boleh nampak Amir apa yang saya tulis?
Boleh, Prof.
Pada poster ni. So saya contoh sikit lah pada poster ni. So basically when we talk about summative assessment, nama pun summative. So basically we sum up all the assessment that we give students throughout the semester, A3, A4, and also final exam. So we add marks for assessment 1, assessment 2, assessment 3, assessment 4, and also final exam together to give students grades. So those are basically summative. So like what PT3 did was they actually removing one component, which is this one. But exam is not the only summative assessment. All I'm saying is that I'm sure all of us must have other component of assessment, summative assessment in your course. So sometimes lecturers put here you have tests, sometimes you have assignment 1, and then you have presentation. So those are basically your formative assessment. So let us leave the jargon as it is because I would like now to focus on the examination first before we look into this part of assessment. As I mentioned earlier on, when we begin with, when we talk about assessment, because assessment consists of continuous and also normally we run final exam. So the first part of this session, we will explore examination and how we can actually transform our examination into digital examination where we actually do it online, and how are we going to deal with online examination before we go into digitalization of our examination. Then only we go into other types of assessment that normally we call it continuous assessment. So this is, as I mentioned, this is the main feature between examination, and we can see, as I mentioned earlier on, examination is basically one of the summative that we conduct under observation, right?
Yeah.
If we look at the main feature of examination, this is the type of formative assessment. Sorry, this is the type of summative assessment where questions are not made available before the exam time. Mainly, normally we measure cognitive ability. It is high stake because whatever that they perform on that particular day will actually give them grades, regardless whether they are fit to sit for the exam or not, whether they feel tired or whether they are actually ill on that particular day. They just have to sit for the exam. And the exam normally do not actually give student feedback. They normally in terms of pen and paper, and normally because they are in terms of pen and paper, when we actually turn into, when we ask students to digitize when we digitize our exam, we normally ask students to scan their answer script and then upload into the Moodle. And exam is also an assessment where we actually give student in the same time, space, and we give everybody the same question. And because we give everybody the same question, we have to observe the examination will have done an observed condition because we want the work is solely of an individual, meaning that we want an authentic answer from students. So these are basically the main challenges of examination if we have to actually do it online, right? Actually, after that, I would like to talk about alternative assessment. However, let's before we talk about um, alternate assessment and also another type of flexible assessment, let us finish off the examination first. So if we look at the main feature of examination that I've went through with you just now, we can see that there is an element of mistrust. We decided for students to seek examination. When I talk about mistrust, we went through a lengthy process to make sure that students do not cheat in examination. Okay, there's an issue of integrity, and that's how when examination is done online, meaning that if we start to use technology, start to move towards digitization of examination as one of the assessment, as one of the summative assessment, then we really have to take care of the integrity aspect. And this is when a lot of people talk about the first thing that people go for is actually the proctoring devices, this and that. But I think we are all aware that not many universities can afford proctoring devices, and also the system for everybody to use is very expensive. And from the experience that we had for the past 2 years, many higher learning institutions, not only higher learning institutions, many institutions talk about whether or not we need to take care of this integrity issue using the proctoring devices. And a lot of people advise is not to go for proctoring devices and system as your first choice. So because that is the global advice to many higher learning institutions, I would like to share with you, right? One of the technique that I've shared with others as well for the past 2 years on how we can reduce the effect of cheating if we were to perform our examination online. All right, but this method is also applicable in general if we were to design our summative assessment or any form of assessment. If we are thinking of digitalization of assessment, right? So all I'm saying is that the method that I would like to share with you is applicable not only for the face-to-face exam, in order to reduce cheating. It's also applicable for online. It's also applicable for digital assessment that we are moving towards later today. These are basically some form of cheating, and I think there's quite a lot of discussion about why students cheat. But I think if some of you can share with me and also confirm with me that nowadays when students are actually sitting for the exam online, be it the continuous assessment or the final exam, they do a lot of discussion, they do a lot of copy and paste. Is it correct? Although we get our students to actually switch on their camera or unmute their mic, they are actually discussing and also doing the exam together. Do you notice this happening at your institution? Can anybody unmute and share your thoughts or your experience?
Yes, it happens, Dr. Aishah.
It happens, right? Uh, actually, I have two of my children who are in higher learning institution in Malaysia, and I think we share the experience as well, and I also observe that is happening. So all I'm saying is that this is happening. So I had a discussion with my colleagues who are in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning group, And I actually provoke my colleagues to think about this, because one of my colleagues said that, one of my colleagues from Utah, she said that students came to her because she is the basically the ketua lah in teaching and learning. She said students came to her and said, what is wrong with us discussing while we are sitting for our exam? Because at the end of the day, what lecturers or what examiners like us to submit is our sole individual work. And they argue that after they have discussed the answer, they write their own answer, meaning that the answer is individual, and that is the one that they are submitting. What do you think about that argument? Do you think that it is acceptable? Would you like to have a discourse with me on this? Because in order for us to move towards digital assessment, I think we have to be ready with all this so-called new normal and new behavior. Are we academics, okay, want to hold on to the basic principles of examination and assessment,
Assalamualaikum,
or
Prof.
should examination and assessment principles evolve with the new normal? So this is one of the biggest challenge that I've been thinking about and wanting to have a discourse with you. Yes, I have a
Assalamualaikum,
response. Yeah, sure.
I'm Nur Haziana from Unimap. In my opinion, kalau macam tu, kita boleh klasifikasikan assessment tu kepada kategori lain, macam interview punya ataupun oral assessment rather than examination. Memang pada saya, kita boleh mula berubahlah kepada a new way of assessing the student. That makes sense lah, kan? Sebab bila dia orang kerja pun, dia tak ada limitation of source of knowledge untuk dia interpret ataupun solvekan problem dia. Pandangan saya sajalah.
Betul, saya setuju. Tetapi thank you, Hazrina. What I like about your response is that I use quite a lot. I use interview quite a lot as examination. Okay, interview as examination. Right? So when we talk about examination, maknanya feature dia macam ni lah. Feature dia yang tadi kan. Where is it, the feature? Main feature. Everybody get the same question. Okay, for example, although I interview my students in a group, right? Each group get the same questions actually. However, their answers can never be the same. So when we talk about interview as an examination, meaning that my aim is to get individual answer. They are in observed condition. I give all students the same questions, but they are not in a pen and paper format. Neither when students are actually being interviewed, they get any feedback. If they give wrong answer, I'll just post different questions until I get somehow quite the right answer from the students, because sometimes students are very nervous. One thing that is good about interview as examination is because you can, to a certain extent, phrase your questions to suit students' understanding, rather than if you go for the normal examination, you give student a question and student if they understand the question or whether they do not understand the question, they will just have to kill the question at that particular time. So thank you so much, Adrina, for telling me about the interview as an examination. However, what I would like to get us to challenge our mind hari ni ialah how do we deal with this type of examination that we have to conduct it online, okay? Dengan membenarkan, is it possible for us to conduct an online exam that we normally do it like this, but allowing students to discuss? What do you think? Boleh ke? Can we actually put student into an examination mode? If we talk about digital assessment, meaning that student can use technology, can use devices, can use internet, okay, and they should be allowed to discuss. But at the end of the day, if they can actually produce this, is it okay with us?
Is that, Prof, is that the approach, one of the alternative approach to avoid the mistrust punya issues ke bila conduct online exam tu? Are you suggesting?
I'm not suggesting that that is an approach, that is a possible approach to conduct the mistrust, because at the moment, memang kita, for your information, if we look at the main feature of examination, the reason why we put student in this condition and in this condition, in a fear condition, is because of the main feature of the exam. So when we had to done it remotely online, right? We struggle to preserve the examination feature, especially on observed condition. This is when we would like to employ the proctoring devices or whatever that we do. And the last bullet here. However, if we look at that, that is from our perspective, right? So from the students, from what really happened, ini yang nak mencabar minda ni, ini yang saya kata way forward ni. How are we going to move forward when we know that the online and also remote assessment, be it examination or other form of summative, okay, be done online, with them, sekarang ni student kita already get used to the new normal. When I talk about new normal, when they sit for their online exam, okay, we are all aware what the examination features are. Same time, same space, but they are discussing during the exam. Will future digital exam be in a form of examination, be it online or digital exam, where students are allowed to discuss? Okay.
One of our participants commented on there.
Would you like to read it for us?
Yeah, sounds like it's an open book exam if we allow them to discuss. So the construct of questions should be more suitable for an open book exam.
Open book exam meaning that you can refer to the book and other resources. But here we are talking about discussion amongst the amongst students during the exam. Is it allowed? Is this a way forward? Is this something that emerged from the pandemic that we have to accept, and hence we have to now redesign examination, redesign online examination, and way forward digital assessment, where students are allowed to sit for examination, where discussions are allowed. Right? So
that means the questions also needs to be redesigned, kan? More into critical thinking rather than asking them direct questions. Otherwise, we would get the same answers.
But if the question is of HOTS and also involve critical thinking, but if they are not authentic, meaning that all students' answers will be the same, because they have discussed, they have used the same, maybe slightly different resources, but they can still submit their colleagues' answer, correct? So we can see here that in order for us to go for proper online assessment, before we go into digital assessment, I think we need to reflect, and we need to start asking ourselves question, how can we now begin to accept what has already emerged from the pandemic? Because this is, although we said that, okay, we do not want students to, all I'm saying is that because it has happened, so I don't think there is a chance for us to go back and reset our students to behave as if pandemic never happened, right? And another thing that I would like us to think about, because of the pandemic, and I think not only because of the pandemic, we are all moving towards digitalization, right? The online assessment and digital exam is here to stay, whether we like it or not. But at what percentage it will be basically implemented in each higher learning institution is all very much depends on us, depends on the curriculum planning. If, for example, UMS is planning to open your doors internationally, and where students from every parts of the world can actually learn in UMS through the so-called micro-credential, through online, then digital exam will be of higher percentage in your practice, right? So if digital exam is here to stay and is here for us to work on, the question is, are we ready to face and are we ready to accept this new so-called culture, new normal, new behavior of our learners? Are we going to make it legit for them to sit for the exam, for their online remote exam, and allowing them to discuss? Open book is one thing, discussion is another thing, right? So I would like to, Amer, is it possible for you to read the
Yeah, sure. We have one, Diana says there, if we were asked to allow for students to discuss during digital exams or assessment, then I would opt for group or collective scores. So what say you, Prof?
But just now, okay, I think that is why itulah saya kata assessment ni dia technical sikit let's stick to the purpose of examination. Assessment is one thing, examination is another thing. Examination is one form of assessment, okay, ataupun satu method of assessment. Just now kita mention tentang our discussion currently is looking at examination dulu before we talk about other forms of assessment. For example, like interview is another form of assessment. And bila kita cakap tentang examination, when we talk about examination, the main feature here is kita nak ukur individual performance. So if we were to give marks for groups, meaning that it is not examination type. Okay, so when we talk about examination, the assessment is of examination type, meaning that our main aim using the examination is to give individual mark. Itu dia punya perbezaan yang sangat ketara lah. Then that's the reason why people use examination is actually to give individual mark. Tetapi sekarang ni, adakah kita nak bagi student individual mark? Are we now willing to move into a new era where we put student into an examination setting, but we are allowing students to discuss during the examination? Meaning that if we look at our examination hall, we observe them, but they're allowed to talk to each other. They're allowed to walk, but at the end of the day, they will have to submit their individual answer. Right? So this is something that I would like us to think about, because the fact that it is happening, this is something that I suppose we should not give it dismiss. Yesterday, when I checked with one of the international digital exam provider, are you aware that there are several basically digital exam provider out there that you can subscribe? Mahal lah tapi. Have you heard of it before? Anybody? Tak pernah ke? Pernah dengar Inspira ke? Pernah dengar tak? Examsoft ni company yang buat Turnitin. Ada lagi a few lah. These are all basically as digital exam provider, okay, that quite a lot of university now have subscribed to this provider where all their assessment, be it final exam, assignment, project, whatever it is, being done through their platform. So they are the one who take care of your reports, they take care of your proctoring, they take care of exam browser log, and quite a lot of things. So later, I think I will share with you some of the materials on these exam providers, right? But before that, let's move on to how can we now, okay, deal with this kind of learner. I'm currently, Amer, ada satu message tadi, boleh tolong bacakan tak?
Yeah, Prof. I think this is the answer from Diana's comment tadi tu from Karzian. She says that collective scores if they are submitting one answer. But if, like Prof said previously, when they submit individual, it means unique answer. So it's considered we assess them individually. And then another one, I'm currently giving my students case studies as an exam, and the case study is given to them one day before to study the case study. So the questions are given on the day of the final examination. Only we need to be careful about the questions asked, but their answers may be similar. However, we can see their critical thinking from the examples they give. I caution them from discussing with each other, but I feel that they may do so anyway. So I give examples so that it can demonstrate their critical thinking.
Okay, so basically just now, the question has been given one day before, is it?
Yeah.
So kalau
case study, case study given the day before.
Yes, so the case study was given a day before. So that is not considered exam. Sebab tadi exam dia punya definition, you give the same, the question is not revealed before the exam day.
The case study is given a day before to them to study the case study, and the questions are given on the day of the final exam. So
the case study was given before, but the question is given
on the day of the final examination.
Right, on the day of the final examination. So
Yeah.
it is considered exam because the question is on the final exam.
Yes.
Only the case was is given before. So that's fair. That is examination. Okay.
Yeah.
So meaning that students can actually discuss the case. So when students are allowed to discuss the case, what do other things? Is it correct? Personally, I think that is what students are supposed to do. They are supposed to discuss the case, but they don't know what the question is.
Yeah, the issue is that we just need to be careful about the questions that we ask, and we might expect the answers may be similar. But
But if you give the question on the day of the exam, and if the exam is basically observed and not online, so it is possible for you to get individual answers, right? But if, for example, you do the exam online, okay, it is possible that during the exam, students are still discussing about the question itself, right?
yes.
Hmm.
But one way of doing this, maybe we can see the critical thinking level from the examples that they give. So answers might be similar, but in the way how they answer it in terms of giving examples might be different.
The examples might be different. Okay, so later, boleh tak saya tanya tadi siapa yang bagi case study tadi tu?
We don't have the name; they're just numbers from
Okay.
2644 something. So
Okay, never mind.
yeah, if you don't mind, whoever asking, giving this opinion, this is very good points. Maybe you
Yeah.
can unmute yourself and share with us your experience. Yeah. And Prof,
Yeah.
we have one more question from Siti Rahayu, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
How do we know for sure that our students will submit their own answers? There is also a possibility that some of them will end up copying each other's answers.
Thank you. So sekejap lagi tadi yang bagi case study tu later. So now I would like to share my way, right? In making sure that students will submit their individual answers, and I do not use proctoring devices. I allow students to discuss during exam. So kata dia orang nak buat apa. But this is how I did it to make sure that students will still submit their individual answers. So let us now look at how I use the so-called project and also authentic assessment so-called parameters in writing the examination questions so that it fit for us to put it online. And it will also be the same technique that I would like to recommend people if they move towards digital exam, right? So nanti ingatkan saya to go back sebab soalan yang last tadi tu saya jawab sekarang. So these are basically the technique that I use. So I call the technique as a two-step approach. Why is it two-step approach? Because I know if students were to sit for their examination online, meaning that they get access to the internet. Betul? Betul? Sebab the definition of online is actually when you use internet. Nama pun line kan, maknanya ada line kalau dulu line telefon lah ataupun line internet. You need to be having a line, right? So that is what online. So if students sit for online exam, then the first thing that we need to take care of to reduce as much as possible their ability to cheat. So we need to make sure that we use some of these so-called cheating countermeasures. So there's a lot of teaching countermeasures out there. So you are more than welcome to use your own online cheating countermeasures that you are comfortable with, right? So this is the first step. So the first step is to choose what are the cheating countermeasures that you'd like to employ, right? So what I did was I chose this particular resource, and I quite like this resource because it's only one page and it is also straightforward, and it has 14 basically lists in the countermeasures. So I decided to use quite a lot. So what I did was I used number 1. I did not use countermeasures number 2. I used countermeasures number 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7. I did not use number 8 of a different version. No. Plan for technical issues. Yes. Refrain from using publisher test bank verbatim. No. Protect questions. Okay, so these are basically, I picked from the list the countermeasures that I would like to actually use for my digital or online examination. And step number 2, okay, is to basically rephrase the questions. Okay, so basically these are some of the preparation if we were to conduct the so-called online and also digital exam, right? For example, we need to check our students' connectivity, devices, learning space. We need to make sure that we select appropriate examination types. These are basically some of the lists that we can go through to make sure the success of our digital or online exam. And we need to create basically the space for students to sit for the digital exam or the online exam. If we use our LMS, we need to make sure that students are familiarized with that space, because when students go through the so-called in-person or physical examination, normally kita akan bagi dia nombor bilik exam kan, ataupun exam hall. Okay, the name of the exam hall. So similarly, if we want students to sit for digital exam or online exam, we need to actually tell them where is the space and where they can find them, or we can give them the link. So if we use Moodle, for example, then we need to make sure that they have actually visited that particular space. So sama je sebenarnya digital dengan physical space is actually the same. So we have to make sure before the exam, we have identified and have announced to students that these are your exam space, and please have a look at the space or the digital exam hall. Then you have to make sure that you set up the hall. Kalau misalnya physical examination, okay, we normally put the chairs in rows and all that. So similar, and all the boxes where they have to submit their answer script. So similarly, if you do digital exam or if you do online exam, you need to create that space, and you need to create those boxes for your students to submit, and make sure that students know where they need to submit, right? And it is also best practice if you would like to do your if you would like to conduct digital exam or online examination, you ask students to go into that space and try to submit or upload their answers or get themselves familiar with the system. Even if you subscribe to a digital exam provider like Inspira or ExamSoft, they will actually train us, the lecturers, on how to set up questions, this and that, how to get used to the report and all that. But they also will actually train students so that students are familiar with the digital exam hall. And I think these are very, very important issues when we talk about digital exam and how we use technology to get our students and ourselves prepared for this digital space, right? So in order for us to handle the issues of cheating just now, so kita pergi baliklah kepada isu cheating tadi and also integrity. I would like to share my own technique on how I created questions that I think when coupled with steps number 1 just now, the countermeasures too. Okay, when I actually use the countermeasure plus, okay, plus writing authentic exam question, I found that the cheating, the issues of integrity and also cheating is much reduced. And in fact, when I first experimented this technique, I had almost zero cheating occurred on that particular session. So I experimented this technique in the second semester after COVID-19. So we had COVID-19 in March, right? Which is second semester 1920. So first semester 2021, I actually experimented this technique and I found that almost zero cheating occurred. So how I did it. So let's look at how I use the so-called a technique called authentic performance task and project in writing authentic exam question. Actually, this book was launched, okay, at the beginning of pandemic COVID-19, and it was not meant for us to use it to write authentic exam question. However, when I went through the webinar, and when I actually bought the book, I realized that I can actually innovate from this book and use the technique to design authentic exam question fit to actually fight the issues of cheating in an online and also digital exam. So this is how I did it. So for your information, in that book, they have actually introduced, the book introduced 12 parameters altogether. And the purpose of that book is for us to design authentic project or assignment. And I'm sure majority of us must have experience when we design our assignment, right, or project or case study for our students, we found that cheating still occurs, although we are using the so-called authentic assessment. Because project, assignment, case study, case-based, game-based, they are all authentic assessment. We normally use them as continuous assessment, right? Although they are authentic assessment, we still actually experience that students are actually copying each other. They cheat, they plagiarize when they perform all these authentic assessment. So this book is aimed to help us as teachers and also like teachers in higher education to design our alternative and authentic assessment so that we will help students to be confident of coming up with their authentic work so that the work is solely of theirs, right? So let's examine what are the technique actually being introduced by this book. This book actually have introduced altogether 12 parameters. So basically the 12 parameters is for example, the time frame, the integration of subject. You can see all the 12 in the list in this particular slide. However, when I look at all these 12 parameters, I found that there are several parameters that I can actually steal, okay, or extract and use the parameters in my exam question so that my exam question will turn from typical traditional examination where I give student in the exam hall for the physical exam, so that it can now turn into exam question that is fit for me to give my student online, and I can make sure that they cannot cheat, right? So the two parameters that I always use is degree of authenticity and also students' choice and voice. But you are more than welcome to use any other parameters if you are comfortable with. So I would like to demonstrate how I change my exam question, the normal exam exam question, okay, by just attaching these two parameters in the existing exam question. So let's have a look. Okay. So this is my original exam question. If you look at my original exam question, I based on the learning. Sorry, this is the exam question. This is the exam question, and this is the learning outcome. So you can see that I am teaching geotechnique. Okay, where students need to describe where soil is actually coming from, how they are formed, and what rock is all about. So basically, the learning outcome is about asking students to be able to describe the formation of geomaterials, right? And one of the assessment to measure that learning outcome is actually examination. So before the pandemic, I've already wrote my exam question, and the exam question was phrased like this, okay? Because it is only C2 comprehension, so I intended to actually just measure students' ability to comprehend what I've taught them in the class. So the question I give my student is describe the soil formation using a simple tree diagram. And you can see that if I were to, and after I've created this question and suddenly it was pandemic COVID-19 and we have to do it online, and there is an instruction for us to change it into so-called authentic question, this and that, to curb cheating from occurs. Then what happened was I said to myself, if I give my student this question, they will be able to look at their notes and they will be able to reproduce my slide. And in fact, this is what I've expected from my students actually. Ini jawapan, salah satu jawapan dia. Actually, the answers is only from one of my slides. So I know that if I were to give my student this question and I did not change anything, then all students will give me same answers because they actually come up from a slide that they can copy during the exam. So how do I attach variable number 5 here? You can see that variable number 5, authenticity, where variable number 5 is actually attaching the authenticity parameter. And there are actually 4 ways to create authenticity in your question. One is to attach context. So we talk about attaching context. You can actually ask your student to resume a particular role. So you can see here, the stem of my question is still the same because this is what I need to measure, ability to describe. So I keep the stem of the question, but I attach variable number 5 by write a short note to your senior technologists, because I know that majority of my students will become engineering technologists in future. So I asked them to resume a role of senior technologist. So I decided to use a simple parameter that is context authenticity, but you can actually step up and use the second level of authenticity parameters where you put your student in a real process environment where you can actually put your student into real tasks during the exam, where you can actually put your student into using the real tool during the exam or quality standard, whatever, right? There are other authenticity method as well, where we can actually attach to the question. We can also get students to now talking about impact on others, and another authenticity approach that I like to attach in my exam question is always on personal authenticity, which I will explore a little bit later. But you can see here, this is an example how I attach the first variable using the simplest low order authenticity, that is contact authenticity, into my question, right? And to make sure that students' answer are different, we can actually add more instruction to this exam question, where we can either get students to either rather than write, we can get students to record their voice, okay, individual voice. We can get them to draw a concept map. We can get them to actually come up with a poster using any of the tools that they are familiar with. So there are so many ways and also combination how we can get different answer from students, right? So that is the first part of me changing my question. Then I said to myself, okay, if I only attach one parameters, maybe together with the cheating countermeasures just now, okay, maybe student can still cheat lah. So what I did was I decided to add another parameter to my question. So the second parameter that I add to my question is actually variable number 9. So variable number 9 is about adding choices to your students. Okay, so the first part is you ask student to resume a role. So you can actually make it even harder, maybe lah harder lah, where if you have students, you have already randomly assigned, okay, student number 1, assume that they need to write a note to senior technologies, and then student number 2, they have to write a short note to, for example, to the minister, and then student number 3 write a short note to the general public, and then student number 4 write a short note to, for example, I don't know, a different audience. So basically, even with the first part of the parameter, we can make it even we can even vary the roles. So there are so many roles that you can get your student to resume in the exam questions. So what I would like to explain now is how I attach variable number 9. So you can see here, variable number 9, I decided to use design variable yang nombor 3 tu, same product different focus. Why I choose same product different focus is because I still want them to describe, meaning that everybody, regardless of their choice, okay, the choice that I'm given to them is actually the one in the green box, right? So I've given them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 choices altogether, right? But although they have 7 choices, each individual will choose their own preference, right? They still have to produce a note that describe the soil formation. So meaning that they have to produce same product, but different focus. Okay, so that's what variable number 9 is all about. So during the exam, what make this successful when I attach this technique in rephrasing my question into authentic exam question together with the counterpart is because satu, if we look at the cheating countermeasures just now, because I give student one question at a time, and I give student only 30 minutes for each question. Okay, they do not see other questions. Okay, and they cannot backtrack. When we talk about cannot backtrack, after they complete one question, I will give them time to submit. Then only they will get second question. Then they have time to submit. So with that cheating countermeasure, when I couple these cheating countermeasures with this type of question, I found that students had difficulties to cheat because in the first place, the first part when I actually conduct a survey on my students on this experience actually, because this is part of my research. They said that asking them to resume a role during when they have to answer the exam, because that in itself that makes them a little bit disorientated. Okay. Padahal what they need to focus is actually at the stem of the question. And secondly, when they have choice, actually student need time. Each student will choose differently. It is because of that 30-minute window and no backtracking, it is actually quite difficult for them to discuss lah, although I did not actually said to them that they cannot discuss, because I tahu dia akan discuss pun. So what happened was, it is very difficult for them to find out who is actually answering, who is actually choosing near seaside, who is actually choosing near the hilltop, who is actually choosing at the toe. See, that 30 minutes is not really that long for them to find out who is actually doing what, and then they have to write their own answer, and then they have to really answer the question. So I have tried this method when I deal with the remote online exam, and I found that it was quite effective in actually reducing cheating during the exam. Is there any questions so far on the method that I share with you?
Yes, Prof. We have one question
Uh-huh.
from the Kamarudin. How to moderate this kind of final exam question? What is your best practice?
Moderate tu maknanya macam mana?
Maybe Mr. Kamarudin, can you explain further? What do you mean by moderate?
Okay, Dr. Amer. Basically, when we have this kind of final exam questions, so the set of questions will be moderated by other lecturer to make sure that it is aligned with a certain LO and also certain teaching and learning activities. So the question also together with the answer. So since you have authentic kind of these kind of questions, so how do the best practice such that we able to moderate it easily?
Yeah, thank you so
Okay,
much
thank
for the
you.
question. When I don't know about UMS moderation practice, okay. However, all I'm saying is that when we moderate exam question, the first thing which I agree with is with the siapa tadi yang tanya? Sorry.
Kamarudin.
Kamarudin, I agree with Kamarudin. When you moderate a question, you need to make sure that the question is actually aligned with the learning outcome. So if you look at this question, although the question has been rephrased so that it actually turned into authentic exam question, the question is still actually aligned to the learning outcome because the stem of the question tidak berubah. Jadi, marking scheme tidak berubah. Meaning that I know that quite a lot of people ask, since Dr. Aishah, you give student choices, okay, will students answer, will each of the students answer be different? I said no, because regardless of they choose which or any one of the choice that I've provided here, this the basically 99% of the mark is actually given on the stem of the question, which is ability to describe the soil formation as what it is said in the learning outcome. So when other lecturers moderate my question, what they need to check is the question aligned with the learning outcome? So if we look at this exam question, I'm sure you can see that it is 100% aligned with the learning outcome, because the learning outcome said that students should be able to describe the formation of geomaterial. Here, the question said describe the soil formation. Soil is actually one of the geomaterial. This question is only part A of question number 1, and it is actually measuring this particular part of the learning outcome, right? But because the question is meant for an online or digital exam, Therefore, perhaps the moderator now will have to look at what are the authenticity feature or the hot feature of the question, right? So thank you so much, Kamarin, for bringing this up, because I think if we are going towards digital assessment, I think the moderation practice or instruction must have an additional clause where if the question, if the examination or if the assessment is digital in nature or online in nature, the assessment instruction or the question must have authenticity and HOTS. Can we agree on that?
I think Dr. Dennis also commented just now about moderating. He says moderating should assess how far the test items are complying with the constructive alignment.
Correct. So that is a must. That is number one. Tapi tadi saya suggest normally kalau kita buat if we are conducting the so-called in-person or physical assessment, be it exam or be it assignment, okay, then basically memang kita wajib check alignment soalan peperiksaan ataupun alignment arahan assignment kepada student tu mesti align dengan learning outcome. Itu wajib. Tetapi I'm also suggesting that if we were to move towards digital assessment, we need to add another feature in moderation. And the second feature in moderation that I would like to suggest for us to add is to make sure that the assessment instruction, be it exam questions or the project instruction, will have to consist of authenticity feature and also HOTS. Nampak tak? Tadi moderation kita ada satu je syarat kan? Kita check alignment, constructive alignment. However, kalau kita nak buat assessment tu digital, okay, ataupun online, moderation punya kriteria ataupun syarat yang pertama ni dah tak cukup. It is not adequate for us just to moderate or just to check alignment. We need to add on another criteria or syarat where the instruction will have to be authentic and sekurang-kurangnya HOTS.
Yang pasal HOTS tu, what if subject tu apa ni?
Memang C2. Macam kes saya.
Bukan, subjek tu dia level 1 punya subjek. So most of the LOs tu kan semua low order punya. Macam mana, Prof?
Itulah sebab tu kalau low, that is also my dilemma actually. Thank you for the question. I was asked to come up with HOTS question, whereas my learning outcome is only C2, right? So that is the reason why I did not created HOTS question. Sebab tu soalan saya masih lagi C2, describe. Tetapi saya sekarang ni soalan saya online dan nanti saya akan tunjuk kalau macam mana saya nak approach kepada digital exam. Jadi saya tak boleh naikkan ini kepada C3 contohnya ataupun C4. Sebab C3, C4 baru HOTS kan? Okay. So I cannot do that. So what I did is I actually keep my C2, but I create the question so that the question is authentic in nature. And how I create my question so that it is authentic in nature is by attaching 2 variables from 12 variables suggested in the book that I shared with you just now. So that is the approach that I use. I have experimented for the last 3 years, and it has been very successful for me lah, at least. So I don't know about others.
Basically, Prof, kalau moderation ni, especially for online kan, what is most important is the authenticity of the questions lah kan.
Yes,
Even
betul.
if you have low order punya questions, but if you ensure authenticity, low order
Yes.
also can sound like high order punya questions, right? I mean, it
Hmm,
doesn't change the low order punya apa ni.
nampak macam hard ada, tetapi tak juga. Sebab at the end of the day, as I mentioned, this is a must. This is a must regardless whether it is digital exam or non-digital exam, whether it is online or whether it is in person. Constructive alignment is a must. If constructive alignment is not being taken care of, the assessment is not considered valid. Validity is very, very important. I think everybody knows about this. Validity is very important in assessment. Assessment is not, it cannot be used for basically it cannot be used, the data cannot be used for CQI, the data cannot be used to award your student, the data cannot be used for you to graduate the students in the first place. And it is not, in outcome-based education lagi serious, because and in competency-based, it is even more important because you are releasing a product that is not fit and not safe for the public, right? So that is why constructive alignment, as I put here, as priority number 1, regardless be it digital assessment or non-digital assessment. However, like what I've suggested just now, if we were to deal with digital assessment, be it online or be it physical digital assessment, then we need to put on top of constructive alignment either authenticity or HOTS. When you attach authenticity to, for example, low level of taxonomy, it looks as if the questions sounds or looks like HOTS, tetapi tak sebenarnya. Tapi memang student perlu berfikir dan perlu confidence secara individual. This is something that I think we need to train our students. Majority of our students, from my experience of my experiment on this technique, dia boleh jawab sebenarnya, tetapi dia tak confident untuk, satu, untuk jawapan dia sendiri. Okay. Yang kedua, dia tak confident untuk, there's a lot of confidence lah here, to be honest. Okay. Tak confident untuk think critically for themselves sebenarnya. So bila kita attach authenticity ni, dia ada element of personal. That is when you get that individual answers actually. Saya nampak tadi ada dekat chat box. Amer boleh tolong bacakan tak?
Yes. Another comment from Dr. Dennis about LOTS tadi tu, low order thinking skills. Dia kata LOTS can use different types of methods or techniques. For example, like creating a big question bank and randomizedly assigned to students. Prof, can I ask how many students involved for this course? I mean, for this exam question.
Masa saya okay, currently I have 125. I'm using the same technique. Previously I have like 75. I have masa mula-mula pandemik dulu tak berapa ramai lah, dalam 30 lebih kurang macam tu. But current I'm still using this technique for my subject, because my subject is still online actually.
Just asking for your views, Prof. Okay, it's very interesting to to understand this technique lah, kan, especially on authenticity ni, when you want to design a question for online. But what if that particular course, I think some of our lecturers, they have to, they have hundreds of students in one single class. Kadang-kadang ada yang sampai almost 300 to 400 students in one class for that particular course. And if we were to, apply the same methods of doing these online questions, how can they, you know, what marking tu, Prof? Mungkin they have problems in terms of marking pula kan, sebab involve hundreds of students kan. So that would be another issue. So what do you think?
Okay, selalunya kelas yang besar-besar macam tu adalah kelas bagi subjek fakulti kan ataupun subjek universiti, tu tak?
Ya, universiti ataupun fakulti.
Selalunya subjek, sebab kita bila kita design the program, not the projection to the number. Projection audience number is always like 40, 60. Kalau ikut staff student ratio, we will project about 40 per cohort, right? So when we talk about large size classroom, right? Large size classroom are normally mata pelajaran umum kan, ataupun using examination lah, okay?
Yes.
We are being highly recommended to use high impact educational practices where they actually work in teams, because most of the time the learning outcome that we are trying to measure is especially their teamwork, their ethics, their communication skills. So we very seldom use examination where we would like to focus on individual performance, right? So sebab tu kat sini saya rasa we need to think of saya rasa assessment ni topik dia besar lah. Actually kalau untuk exam ni kita buat untuk yang kelas yang core lah, yang kita kan tadi kita dah tengok kan what are the main features of exam. Main features of exam are normal. Yang kedua kita nak measure cognitive ability kan. And then satu lagi kita nak itu sebab saya rasa examination feature ni kita memang kena faham lah. So kita akan pilih assessment method examination ni if we want that particular if we want the instrument to perform as what it says. Right? Kalau saya tak rasa sesuai untuk guna exam, so kita kena guna digital assessment yang lain. So macam yang tadi tu macam kita guna project, for example, kita guna case, kita guna problem base, kita guna game base. So that one we can actually design it. Itu yang tadi Dr. Dennis bagi. Kita boleh, kalau you tengok MPU for example, where we expect large number of students, okay, there is a requirement of 30% examination, okay, but the examination meant in the MPU book is not necessarily final exam, although many people misinterpret it, okay. The examination means that we just need to get students to sit for any kind of cognitive punya examination session. It can be, Dr. Dennis beritahu tadi lah, kita randomize question, they have to sit for quiz, they can play games during the same time to apa ni, for us to be able to know whether they got the subject content and many other ways lah on how we do things. So if we have large number of students, digital exam offer a much better solution for the lecturers in terms of marking lah, because if you digitalize your assessment, then you get help from the technology to resolve you punya marking problem. Tetapi yang saya tunjuk sekarang ni ialah the online exam dahulu sebenarnya, where we're here actually. I'm just demonstrating to you how you can actually rephrase your question so that it fits into online and also digital exam scenario, both lah. Okay.
Thanks, Prof.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Clear.
So, shall we move on a little bit?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. I will share with you this slide, although this slide is not yet available for you. I just like to very quickly show with you what degree authenticity is all about, because these are the variables that I demonstrated to you how attached to my question. There are four ways to create authenticity, either in your other summative assessment, or in your final exam. So just now you have seen how I use this parameter to rephrase my final exam question, but you can use this parameter now to write your, for example, your project instruction, okay? Your case-based instruction. So you can still attach all these parameters into your assessment instruction for other summative assessment than examination question, right? Just now you have seen how we talk about context assessment. Context assessment is about you get students to resume a role, and you can see there are so many roles that you can get your students to resume. You can get students to resume as mathematicians, for example, architect, engineers, and so on and so on, if you are dealing with mathematical questions. If you are dealing with, for example, scientific questions, and you can get students to assume that they are biologists, botanists, and so on and so on. So whatever profession that you feel appropriate that they will become, you can get your student to think of that particular roles, right? So that is what context authenticity is all about. And the second way of authenticity is actually to get students to consider real cases, right? Real cases. So in real cases, I don't know whether you have tried this or not. I have not, but I intend to do it with other subject because I've not given the chance to teach lab subject, for example, or other subject. During the exam, okay, we can actually get students to, because we cannot ask students to go out masa pandemik hari itulah. I cannot get my student during the exam tu untuk keluar dan do something or go to their kitchen and do something, for example. So I intended to get my students during the exam to watch the video of real basically technician performing certain tests or certain tasks, and the question will be based on that particular video. So different student will get different link to the video. So you can also do that actually. So that is creating or attaching authenticity to your exam question or to your assessment using the second way of creating authenticity, right? And you can see here in this example, some teachers actually get student, okay, sebab for them, when these students go out from the university, they have to maybe at one point having to produce a poster using Canva or produce a poster using other picto chart or other infographic tools or whatever tools that they have to use when they work. So during the exam, we can actually create question where they have to perform that particular task, right? So that is the second way to create authenticity in examination or in other form of assessment if we were to go through digital assessment. And then we can also attach in our questions, okay, or in our project or assessment instruction on how whatever that they work on have an impact on others, right? So this is very, very powerful because this is when you want them to create a meaning in what they do. So when they have to create a meaning, whether they like it or not, they have to really understand what they are doing and they have to start thinking. So impact on others is really a meaning making process, okay, where they cannot copy and paste, right? So they need to think about it. What I like about personal authenticity, which I use a lot lah nowadays, in my final exam question or in my midterm exam question, is I attach personal authenticity in my questions. So personal authenticity ni saya belajar masa saya dekat Manchester when I did my sabbatical leave. So I like to share a bit on that experience. So when I enroll for a staff training program, okay, normally in Malaysia, our staff training program works such that if you enroll, right, on the day you will be given the material, then you will sit and listen to the speaker, and then when you go back, you are expected to be able to implement, and nobody actually monitor whether or not you implement, whether or not whatever that you have learned from the training program is actually effective or not. I have to pause here because maybe UMS did not do this. Again, UMS is exceptional. But all I'm saying is that most of training programs in Malaysia actually still in that particular mode. But in 2011, when I joined the Manchester Metropolitan University training program for lecturers, that's when I learned what outcome-based education is all about and how to design a proper session. So when I enroll for a program, for a session, for example, like today's session, okay, once I enroll, I have been asked to actually sign an integrity form. The integrity form will actually tell me that I will have to come. If I don't come for the session, I will have to pay £100. Secondly, I have choice whether to sit for the summative assessment, and I have to pay for £200 for summative assessment, and hence I will get a credit. And after I get a credit, I can actually change the credit and enroll for my, for example, diploma in teaching or whatever it is. Or I can attend and actually participate in the activities and also formative assessment during the session. So that is the first thing that happen when you enroll to any staff development training program or a course. And then after you enroll, you automatically get link where you can access all the materials in the LMS platform, and there you already got your learning outcome, you already got all the pre-session worksheets and also all the materials that you will have to go through before you come for the session. So let's say I have like 2 hours training on that particular day, session that I have to go through that particular day. I have to spend minimum like 4 or 5 hours to read journals attached to that particular session. I have to listen to the podcast, I have to go through all the PowerPoints, and I have to answer the pre-session worksheets. So the pre-session worksheets, okay, has personal authenticity in that worksheet. The worksheet have 3 questions. So lepas saya dah baca after I went through the PowerPoint, read the journals, listen to the podcast, right? There are 3 questions altogether. And I would like to give you an example. One of the training that I went through, and it was called learning theories. Okay, learning theories. So nama training tu adalah learning theories, and it was for 2 hours. So the question in the pre-session worksheet was very personal to me lah. So I cannot actually go to the session the next day and copy other people's answer, because the question is like this: when do you use which learning theories do you use in your teaching? That is very personal, isn't it? Okay, so when I go to the training program the next day, each and every one of us has different answer to that. And then we have to explain. The second part of the question is that describe how you use that learning theories in your class. Okay. And then the third question is, what do you think of the effectiveness of that learning theory in your class? So this is the pre-session worksheet that we have to prepare before we sit for the 2 hours training program. So during the 2 hours training program, we had a micro lecture for 10 minutes. Then everybody will have to pick up their pre-session worksheet and have to present as a formative assessment. And that's how we discuss and get the content of the training delivered, right? So only after we completed the 2 hours, then those who need to get credit for that particular training program will receive their questions, right? And will have to prepare critical reflection paper for them to submit to get credit for that particular training program. So that's how they design the staff training program. And that's how I learned about outcome-based.
Sini ambil takut ambil ubat tu. Dulu dia ambil ubat sendiri.
So if you look at, so that when I receive the pre-session worksheet, that's how I learn what personal authenticity question is all about. You see, although all the materials given to us before the training program, they are all the same. We got the same slide, same PowerPoint, same podcast, same journal, and same question, but our answer within each participant will never be the same, right? So this is an example of how we can create questions that fulfill the so-called personal authenticity. Okay. Ada question tak on the parameters on degree of authenticity?
So far we don't have questions, just comment from Dr. Kamarudin just now. But he valued your sharing. Thank you very much. For him, this authenticity will help in developing problems related to complex engineering problems, broadly define engineering problems, and as well as define engineering problems.
But it can, but I think it can also be applied to any other discipline as well, not necessarily to engineering lah, right?
Another one from Dr. Abu Bakar.
Yeah.
About questions. The question changed to more complex level. However, I see the marks remain the same. On top of that, I think the SLT, which is the student learning time, also need to be reconsidered. With this kind of question, for sure, it needs more time to answer.
Okay. I do agree with that. Itu sebab saya kata rasanya bila when we talk about academic discourse, especially on teaching and learning, there is no right or wrong answer. That is why I am more I welcome anybody to share your best practices as well. I think the comment is valid. However, as I mentioned, my focus is on the yellow part of the questions. And although when creating authentic questions, it created some kind of what do we call some kind of dizziness amongst our students. But I think if the students has been trained to focus on the stem of the problem or stem of the question, they should be able to answer the questions within the time that we have created for them lah. But then again, yes, I do agree with that comment. I think the subject matter expert is the one who will make the final decision whether or not the student requires more time, especially when you attach the two parameters in one question, or whether or not they won't need much higher time or more time than what they should be able to answer, right? Okay, so these are, can we move on? Ada satu lagi daripada Syamsul tadi?
Yeah, is it by changing the main words, for instance, evaluate, describe, calculate, the Bloom taxonomy will be changed too without rephrase the entire questions?
Macam mana? What was the question again?
Maksudnya kalau if we change the main words like evaluate, describe or calculate, normally kan when we ask questions, we directly ask questions, evaluate this analysis or describe some processes. Will the Bloom taxonomy change too without rephrasing the entire questions?
Yang ini ada beberapa guru lah, so I have to be very careful. I don't know which guru UMS is actually using, school of thoughts, because if you ask me personally, my answer will be like this. But then again, as I mentioned, you will have to stick to directive from UMS, yeah, right? Sebenarnya, the assessment, if you notice, I use a lot of these terms, assessment instruction. Assessment instruction. Assessment instruction apa? Assessment instruction ni maknanya the exam question. Apa yang kita instruct student untuk buat waktu assessment tu? Kalau misalnya assessment tu ialah case based ataupun project, maknanya kita akan bagi student project brief lah. So itulah project brief, itulah assessment instruction. Project brief contohnya. Ia adalah assessment instruction. Kalau examination, exam question itu adalah assessment instruction. Okay. The verb, bila kita instruct student, obviously kita akan guna action verb. Action verb in assessment instruction dengan action verb pada learning outcome tak sama. Okay, saya pause. Action verb dekat assessment instruction dengan action verb pada learning outcome adalah dua perkara yang berbeza. So I leave it to you whether you agree with me or you disagree with me. But this is what I am using and I've been trained for lah to a certain extent. Sebab you can have, for example, assessment instruction where you ask student to solve. And then you bagi student soalan beberapa lah benda yang dia nak kena solve. Kalau saya ambil contohnya konteks maths, mathematics or engineering calculation, for example, you ask student to solve the following problems and then you bagilah problem number 1 and then problem A, problem B, problem C. Padahal dalam kelas kita dah pernah pun buat all these problems, cuma in the final exam you actually changing numbers, you change scenarios, you change roles, this and that. Okay, so the solve as assessment instruction in that case is not solve C4 in the CO. If the reason why I'm saying that is that solve in taxonomy, LO taxonomy, okay, is level berapa? Siapa boleh bantu saya? Solve, for example, in LO taxonomy ialah level, saya rasa at least C4, betul tak?
Macam 4, Prof.
Kan?
Solving,
kepada 4. And if you read the description of what level 4 taxonomy is all about, this is about higher thinking. So when we talk about thinking, thinking is a process. Thinking is not an end product. So when we talk about process, we are talking about time. We are talking about having to get data. We are talking about once you get the data, you have to process, analyze the data, process the data, and then get another data. That is why some school of thought said that anything C3 and above, you tak boleh guna exam. You perlu guna alternative assessment. because alternative assessment is a type of assessment where you give student time to think, because thinking is a process. So kalau misalnya kita, sebab tu kalau dalam projek you bolehlah kata solve this particular problem with the community, so and so. So it's valid. Okay, so assessment instruction dia. Tetapi kalau misalnya dalam exam question kita guna perkataan solve. Solve dalam exam question tu adalah assessment instruction punya verb. Okay. Kalau misalnya benda-benda yang student kena solve itu dalam masa 30 minit ataupun paling lama 2 jam dalam exam, 3 jam dalam exam, okay, where thinking tak boleh berlaku dengan lama, where students tak boleh tengok resources, tak boleh chew maklumat, okay, that solve assessment instruction itu bukan C4. Sebenarnya dia adalah C2. You are just checking comprehension amongst your student. You nak tengok student you faham tak semua problem-problem yang you dah at least tunjuk example dekat dalam kelas, for example. For example, you have given student something that they are quite familiar with. So sekarang ni you tukar scenario this and that. So that is not C4 actually. So according to the other school of thought, that is considered C2 because you are only checking students' comprehension. So sebab if you look at Bloom's taxonomy definition, C3 and above is when you give students something that they never come across before, they're not familiar at all. So typically sebenarnya C3 dah kira macam project lah. Sebab project, you akan bagi dia memang something yang student tak pernah come across. And in fact, dia tak boleh pun tiru dia punya senior sebab kalau you bagi authentic project, meaning that the project has not been experienced before. Right? So I do hope that I answered the question. Saya answer soalan tak?
Prof, I think it's clear.
However, as I mentioned to you, okay, my explanation will need to be checked against your institution directive, right? If your institution ataupun saya tahu some engineering fraternity is actually forcing you, okay, to write exam question or assessment instruction, exam question especially using they said using high Bloom taxonomy. So saya pun macam pening lah juga sebenarnya. Sebab if you understand what the taxonomy is all about, the learning outcome action verb and assessment instruction verb, they are not what we call they are not the same. They are not the same. So we need to understand what taxonomy is all about actually. Right? Okay. So if we can move on a bit. Ya, Amer kena bagi tahu dengan saya bila nak stop. If we can move on a bit, so kita dah went through how we can attach degree of authenticity in our question, be it in exam question or be it in the other forms of summative assessment. Okay, and these are very powerful and important, especially if we were to deal with digital assessment ataupun online exam. Then I think we need to make use of this particular help lah untuk bantu kita pastikan student tak cheat. So satu lagi yang saya nak discuss ialah about student choice of voice. For example, if you look here, I have actually demonstrated how I use same product, different focus, and if you would like your student hopefully not to cheat, you may also ask your student to, especially in the project, okay, you can ask your student to come up with a different product and also different focus, okay. So these are some of the tools that you can use to create your exam question or your authentic project, assignment, case-based, game-based, and so on and so on. So you can see this is an example of another example of student voice and choice in relation to mathematics. For example, in this illustration, you can see that all students need to plot function PT and also RT on a graph. And then you give several scenarios for them to make use of these functions that they have learned. And this is where you give student choice whether they want to make meaning in whatever that they learn here in dealing with pizza topping, or in dealing with football game, or in dealing with business, or even if students can come up with their own scenario, that's even better. Okay. So that is how you give students choice. I think students' choice is also something that I really like when it comes to creating authenticity in either project ataupun exam question. Actually, I've experimented using student choice and voicing, not only in final exam question, but also in my assignment instruction, actually, in my assignment instruction. Okay, and I found it very, very effective indeed. Okay, so you can see that this is the second phase of my experiment. The first experiment that I did was I attached context to my question. On the following semester, I decided not to attach personal context in my question. So if you notice that this is the question that you've seen before, okay. But this time round, I decided still to use variable number 5, but I use the fourth way of attaching authenticity to my existing question, right? So what I did was I asked students, okay, this is a combination of authenticity plus task base using the real data, okay. So what I did was I asked each and every student to scan their ID and also their IC, okay, my card, and then based on their ID or their my card, they will have to actually browse through the web page of Department of Mineral and Geoscience, okay, and find this map depending on their individual address. I ask them to mark their place based on their IC, okay. At the end of the day, the question that they need to answer is still soil formation. But before they can answer the soil formation, I ask them to perform several tasks, okay, that relate to their personal own data. That's how I create personal authenticity here, okay. So after they have marked the address on the map, okay, based on their IC, then only they being asked to describe the soil formation. And in the class, actually, we have discussed that depending on the, for example, this for your information, soil, whatever soil that you are stepping on at the moment, okay, is formed from rock, and it's all depending on what type of rock underneath, underneath your feet, actually. So basically different rock will actually form different types of soil. However, the main process of soil formation is still the same. So sama macam soalan last semester sebenarnya. So you can see I keep the stem of the question all the time, regardless of how I create authenticity to the questions, right? So that is how my question being changed second time round, okay, where I still use variable number 5, but now I use the fourth way of authenticity in the same question as what is planned for the physical face-to-face exam, okay. So I've actually shared with you 2 examples of how I change one question using 2 ways of variable number 5, 2 ways of authenticity. And then the other semester, okay, I ventured into a different form of assessment. This is where I decided to use this way of authenticity. I actually give my student real world processes, okay, as an examination. So what I did was, normally, okay, I will ask my student to sit for a test, okay, pen and paper test, okay, where I give them the data and they will have to process the data using British standard and they will have to name the soil, okay. If it's done in the lab, they will have to go to the lab and they will have to conduct the lab test before they can name the soil. So that is the normal setup, okay. But when I use the second way of authenticity during the online remote, what I did was I actually send them all these actual sample to my students. Different students have different set of sample. So none of them have the same composition of sample. And during the exam, they will have to open up the package. They will have to conduct the test according to the instruction with the actual sample that has been given to them through mail. Saya hantar pakai post laju lah. Okay. So when I design this this assessment, okay, using this type of authenticity, I decided to miniaturize this typical lab work into the so-called MCT. I call it MCTO kit lah, because I also plan for this assessment to be taken by my student who take my subject through micro-credential. Because at the moment I've created one micro-credential and there is an assessment attached to that micro-credential. And for those who prefer to take micro-credential in my subject, they will have to perform this examination. So this is how I created the so-called a task-based examination, okay, and creating authenticity using the second way of variable number 5. Okay, so when we are dealing with online and digital exam, it is not impossible for you to get your students to perform the exam if for example the subject requires certain so-called competency or skill base. Then you just have to create or design an examination or assessment where they can still perform or where they can still develop the skill needed for that particular subject or for that particular discipline. So this is how I created the so-called skill-related examination, where to a certain extent I call it bring the lab to your doorstep kind of exam. Okay. And for some of you who are concerned about the marking when we create the authenticity, when we attach authenticity parameters to your exam question or to your assignment, you will be able to see that this is what is expected for students to produce. This is in fact taken from my slide, okay? And regardless of what the student choose, when I've given student the choice and voice, okay, in the examination, because the stem of the question is about how the soil is actually formed. So this is the main, basically this is the answer that I expected from my students. So this is the example of the marking scheme that I use. And then obviously there is a little bit of marks given to those who extend the answers based on their choice. And obviously I can reduce this mark even further if I need to, right? So these are basically an example, okay, of what the marking scheme look like. So you can see that when I change the question into authentic question, I still expect them to be able to, the most important thing is this is the one that I like to assess them. The stem of the question in yellow, these are all basically an extra if they really understand the question, okay. So another way that I actually get my examination authentic is by getting students to record their voice lah. So basically when I decided, when there is a question where I give them same data and everybody will have to give me roughly about the same question, same answer, how I create authenticity for that particular kind of question is by making them to explain, not by writing, because I know that if they have to explain their answers by writing, they will actually copy from their colleagues. But I actually force my students to record their voice and explain how they arrived to their answers and give justification to why they arrived to their answers. So this is also another way of getting students to give me their individual work from the examination, right? So if we can, Amer, sebab dah 11.35,
Yes,
kita
Prof.
stop pukul 12.
Yeah.
Jadi saya nak masuk the last part lah on digital exam. Just now, if we can reflect a little bit, we have been discussing about two types of assessment. We have been discussing about final exam, and also we have been discussing about continuous assessment. Continuous assessment is majority of us are using alternative assessment like project, assignment, case-based, problem-based, and so on and so on. And we have looked at how we deal with exam and also continuous assessment online, because the issues about online and using technology, students are having more chance to cheat, more chance to do contract cheating, right? There is a problem with integrity. However, based on our experience during the pandemic and everything, as I mentioned, whether we like it or not, digital exam, as I mentioned, is here to stay. So what I would like to share with you now is some ideas that I got from Inspera. This is from Inspera. As I mentioned to you, there are several digital exam provider out there. Inspera is actually one of it. ExamSoft is actually another provider. But Inspera, yearly they have the so-called Digital Exam Forum, and this was based on Digital Exam Forum 2020. Because at that time, during the pandemic, I have to find for myself how best can I assess my student remotely online. So that is how I came about Inspera and how they've been offering this digital exam platform for many universities throughout the world. So they, during this forum, they have talked about the future of e-assessment practice, not only due to the COVID-19, but also the future after COVID-19. So you can see, as I mentioned, when we talk about digital exam, I think he has stressed many times that if we were to go for digital exam, we have to make sure that our assessment instruction, be it exam question, be it project, be it whatever it is, must have an authenticity characteristic in our instruction, right? Sebab itu just now tadi yang saya kata tu, saya akan suggest kepada UMS, first of all, kalau nak moderate future digital exam punya question, satu, mesti check constructive alignment, dua, check for authenticity. Sebab tu saya demonstrate tadi macam mana nak create authenticity dalam assessment instruction, be it in exam question or in a project instructions. Okay, so here you can see ini adalah Inspira punya exam platform, exam platform. So dalam exam platform dia, students akan diberi the original, for example, the original reading material. Okay, so the question is authentic such that, for example, this is the leaflets ataupun ini adalah the actual things that they will have to work when they work in the real world of work lah. And then the question is created based on the article or based on the material yang dia diberi pada waktu exam itu. Okay, so you can see that this article boleh datang daripada link dalam internet ke whatsoever ke, tetapi obviously macam Inspira ni, I think because they are professional exam provider, they have the engine lah, and also they have the software how different article will be for different students. However, they have the same question. So student will rather macam tadi, dalam exam kita akan suruh student tuliskan dekat atas kertas kan, lepas tu guna dia orang punya phone, scan and upload online. However, when we talk about full ataupun future digital exam, okay, student tak tulis atas kertas, dia tulis, they will have to write their answers in the exam platform. So you can see here, this is the space where students will have to write their answers. So their answers will be written, dia boleh buka dua-dua window ni, so the answers will be written in the exam platform itself. So maknanya student akan write answers dalam Moodle lah macam kita kan. Dekat UMS, your platform Moodle platform panggil apa? Anybody? Kalau dekat UTM dia panggil ULearn, kalau dekat UMP kita panggil Kalam. Kalau dekat UMS, your Moodle platform panggil apa? The LMS.
We call it Smart V3.
Sorry?
Smart V3.
Smart.
Yeah, Smart V3.
V3. Like that.
Smart, yeah.
Okay, whatever you call your LMS platform, these are all Moodle based. You can create something similar like this in your Moodle, but obviously because Moodle is a free open source platform kan. Jadi sometimes you need to buy a plugin lah in order for you to go for digital exam. Okay, so this is something that perhaps the organization will have to think about, right? So apa pentingnya sebenarnya nak pakai platform-platform ni ataupun nak create all these digital platform? Please remember, at the end of the day, when our students need to apply for job or whenever that people want to find out about their ability, they need to show evidence that they were able to perform certain things. And if we create an authentic assessment where students can actually put in or put up their answers in a digital platform, and if digital platform allows students to extract some of this evidence into their e-portfolio, this will add a huge advantage in student to sell him or herself to their potential employer. So that is from the student aspect. Okay, from the organization aspect, or from the lecturer's aspect, tengok lecturer's aspect dulu lah Betul tak saya kata, contohnya EAC or any accreditation body will want to see student sample answer yang teruk, yang mid-range and higher score. Betul tak for each subject? If we do not conduct our assessment digitally, alright, then satu in terms of storage lah, okay. I think we all realize with all this pandemic, we relying less on paper. We do not need any physical storage anymore. Everything is in the digital storage. And in terms of traceability by right, and in terms of how fast you can extract you punya samples, should be much better if you go for digital exam. And I think that is the way forward nowadays, where quite a lot of people now start to migrate from the traditional assessment to digitizing assessment, and people are not looking for trying to digitizing assessment, but a lot of people now trying to move towards digital assessment. So we talk about digital assessment, your students' answer, your students' feedback, your students' marking, your students' record, their performance and everything. They are all in a system where people can extract, can access, and can make sense of what assessment is all about. So this is what digital assessment is all about lah. And another thing about creating authenticity in a digital assessment platform, and you can see here, again, this is actually from Inspira platform. We can come up with questions where the platform allow you to link straight to the software needed by students. For example, typical engineering students, when they have to perform stress analysis, right? Using a software, using a finite element software, where they can see where the stresses are concentrated in a structure by looking at different colors, right? So if this is what they need to perform when they work in future, examination by right should place student, okay, should emulate the real world of work, okay, and we cannot. I would like you to start now comparing with physical exam. If you do it face to face, it is very difficult for you to create an exam question where you can get students to perform real tasks during the exam. However, if you move from that point to digital exam, you can get students to perform real tasks, okay, during the exam. So that's what digital exam is all about. Digital exam, to a certain extent, will allow us, okay, to do something realistic that we cannot do with the traditional face-to-face exam, right? So in here, you can see that student will have to perform the analysis, they will have to write their answers in the box provided, and then they have to move on with the questions and so on and so on and so on, right? Boleh ke? Boleh
Boleh, Prof. Okay.
So ini adalah authentic. Kalau you tengok authenticity way number 2 tadi tu, kalau you tengok nature soalan ni lah, where you get students to use the software, the question is actually linked to the software, and then student will have to perform the analysis, quick analysis, and then will have to write your answers in the given box or whatever it is, and then go on and take the next question, the next question. But everything is actually in one platform. Okay, so this is what digital exam is all about. Beza kan dengan digitizing exam. Digitizing exam, macam yang saya buat tadi tu. Saya bagi student authentic question, tapi student masih lagi tulis atas kertas ataupun masih lagi record suara, lepas tu submit on LMS. Tapi ni berbeza. Ni berbeza. Okay? If you look at what digital assessment is all about. So other forms of digital assessment, we can get ini sama dengan jenis yang macam ni. We can set up our questions such that students will be instructed to use, for example, game, okay, in order to perform the assessment, to use software, okay, to use other quiz platform to watch the video, okay. So these are basically some of the ways on how we now ready to set up our digital exam in the digital exam platform. Okay, so I have not tried quite a lot of things actually. So far I've tried those technique that I've shared with you, as well as giving student my MCTO kit, but I have not got the chance to actually create digital exam game, which I plan to do so with my technicians on the lab work. But I think UMS can be, you know, more forward than me. You can explore all this where you will be ready for digital exam, especially if UMS wanting to open up your programs online and also in open distance learning mode via the micro-credential production. Okay. So again, if your students need to answer your questions and having to make use of Excel and so on, they should be given the chance to do so. So all I'm saying is that the best examination is when you put your student in the real world of work, okay, rather than we simulate, rather than we use simulated real questions. All I'm saying that simulated real question is that typically kita bagi soalan exam yang based on macam case-case yang kita dah dapat sebelum ni ke, tetapi kita bagi dia benda yang real during the exam. So saya rasa yang ini yang kita jarang buat lah. Okay, so these are just examples and how the platform look like, okay, for digital exam. You can, as I mentioned, you can also get your students to sit for an exam where they have to go into the third world. Betul ke saya kata third life ke third world? Third life.
Dua-dua boleh.
Dua-dua boleh some of the terms So your students can go into that and perform the exam, because sebenarnya 15 tahun daripada hari ini saya pernah join group daripada Dentistry University Malaya together dengan South Virginia University. They would like masa tu projek mereka ialah they would like to come up with the third life yang style avatar ni, the third life punya game untuk student dentistry ni masuk klinik, diagnose dan do their so-called apa-apalah tampal gigi and so on and so on. Tapi masa tu kita punya discussion was dekat Malaysia ni masalah dengan creating the game masa tu ialah dari aspek linguistik. Sebab orang Malaysia punya daya ketahanan sakit is totally different than Mak Sadeh, dan the language used by Malaysian in expressing their level of pain threshold is very different sebab sometimes orang Malaysia ni dah sakit-sakit sangat pun sajalah kan. And then the fact that we are masyarakat majmuk, different ethnic have different ways of expressing pain. So masa tu the challenge was difficult to code the third life punya program untuk gunakan program tu for dental student to sit for their examination lah. So actually all this thing has been quite a while. All I'm saying is that digital exam and effort towards digital exam has been quite a while and has been used by dentistry, by medical quite a lot actually. And kalau kita tengok salah satu argument yang saya juga nak kita buka minda lah, including myself actually. So when I'm speaking about this, I always have to remind myself. Actually, if we, I'm not saying that I have principle against examination. And especially examination yang jenis pen and paper. Adakah after pandemic ni, okay, we will revert back to the normal exam that we used to and we love to, okay? If the answer is yes, I would like you to rethink, and I would like myself to rethink about it, because nowadays we know that information is everywhere out there, and there is no need for us to develop skills for students to remember and to regurgitate, okay? Therefore, we put them in that traditional examination. If we want to keep examination, all I'm saying is that you keep examination, but please consider digital exam, where you embed authenticity, you embed task-based, you embed real processes in your digital exam if you need to conduct examination, right? The reason why I said do not after the pandemic, sebab saya tahu next sem, in fact dalam semester pendek ni student being called to do their normal physical teaching and learning. Do not go back to that type of examination sebab recently saya pergi jumpa doktor bila saya bagi tahu okay, saya ada come across this particular ubat ataupun supplement, even the doctor have not heard about it. So what they do is they just pick up their, even Dr. Bakar pun nowadays they pick up their handphone, they just tengok je lah apa ubat tu, what is it all about. So there's no need for them to remember. Kalau doktor dulu, for your information, it is very important for them to sit for that traditional exam because they have to remember a lot of nama ubat, fungsi ubat, macam mana nak bagi ubat. In fact, kalau you pergi jumpa GP dulu, they will have to put a book, British BNF, British National Formulary Book. Dekat dalam tu semua ada senarai nama ubat dan prescription macam mana nak bagi semua tu. Tetapi sekarang tak perlu. So all I'm saying is that our exam by right should, sebab assessment, to be honest with you, the function of assessment is to help student to develop learning outcome. Sebab tu lah assessment tu kita kena jaga constructive alignment. Teaching and learning, contohnya aktiviti yang kita buat dekat dalam kelas tu, okay, aktiviti yang kita buat dekat dalam kelas sebenarnya, they are not necessarily have direct contribution to learning outcome development. Katalah ini kita punya LO, ini kita punya assessment. Assessment is actually the one that is responsible to develop the LO. Okay, not so much of you punya TNL activity. Kenapa saya cakap macam tu? Sebab katalah dalam kelas you bagi lecture, you bagi student do things, this and that. Student boleh respond and boleh tak respond, and it doesn't necessarily contribute to this. Tetapi the moment where you put student on assessment, student will prepare for that assessment. And while preparing for the assessment, the LO is actually developing. Sebab tu kalau kita, all I'm saying is that kalau kita nak pastikan LO tu tercapai, kita perlu cari assessment yang mana kita really nak bangunkan LO tu. Dan kalau kita tengok, all the LOs are actually meant for them to perform when they work. So might as well our assessment, be it digital examination, digital assessment, must make them able to perform when they work. And we know that by the time they graduate from now, especially student first year, ada 4 tahun. You imagine what will be the digital work that they will experience after 4 years from today. Okay, so if our assessment masih macam sebelum pandemic, okay, our student will not be prepared for, sekarang ni 2022, campur 4 2026, will not be prepared for the digital environment, working environment when they have to work, okay, in 2026. So all I'm saying is that whether we like it or not, we have to start embracing digital assessment, okay, amongst us and our students so that they are ready for their working life in 2026 onwards. So these are some of the example, and I'm sure you have seen some of these example, and especially nowadays kalau you tengok macam saya kata tadi, tak perlu sebenarnya nak come up lagi dengan soalan student kena ingat lah, kena remember lah. Just nak check comprehension dia ingat ke tak, steps nak solvekan problem yang macam kita tunjuk dekat kelas, dah tak perlu dah sebenarnya that kind of assessment. Because when they work, all I'm saying is that sekarang ni dengan penggunaan AR, VR, siapa yang familiar dengan VR, they just need to put up the headset. Dia akan nampak dah apa yang dia kena buat. So dia dah tak perlu nak ingat steps macam mana nak perform certain things, sebab with the VR as a technology nowadays, kebanyakan company dah start guna AR VR, okay, untuk train dia punya staff, untuk perform, untuk pastikan staff dia perform correctly. Therefore, our assessment must also now moving towards them, moving away from having to remember, having to just showing whether they comprehend what we have shown them in the class. So saya personally, sekarang ni most of my assessment is in the form real world of work, what they have to perform, making meaning in what they do. Okay, so kalau kita tengok all this digital exam has been used quite a lot in medical because kalau kita tengok medical ni memang challenging lah, dengan banyak penyakit yang baru-baru yang kita tak tahu. Dan dalam masa yang sama, you can see they have used, for example, even they have used the mannequin, okay? They have used robots for their trained doctors to sit for so-called digital exam, okay? So these are basically some of the future digital exam that perhaps we can consider and start thinking about lah. So the only thing for people like Dr. Dennis, Amer, and all the pengurusan will have to think about dari aspect from way forward to digital exam. And not only you need to get your staff ready, your students ready, you have to make sure that you also have the technologies, you have good internet connections. You have to make sure that all these need to be looked into. And another thing is, how are you going to make use of the data? There's no point of us creating authentic question. There's no point for us to use all these methods that I've described to you earlier on. But if you don't try to make meaning on why do you assess in the first place, at the end of the day, go back to the basic principle of assessment. Why do you assess your students in the first place, right? We assess our students in the first place. One is to help our students to develop their graduate attribute. I think that is the PLOs, and that is something that we need to take care of. At the end of the day, we want them to be ready for their real world of work, and nowadays there is a trend, especially in Australia, where they created assessments such that the assessment will help students to cope with their first year struggle of their work life. Quite a lot of students bila dia keluar, sebenarnya there is a gap between what they can perform 1 year after they have work dengan apa competency that they got from the 4 years university's life. So in order to bridge that gap, so bila student keluar dekat sini, this is their 4th year and this is their working life. Sebenarnya within that 1 year, itu setahun, 2 tahun, there is a gap here that student, kita punya graduate sebenarnya struggle. Bila graduate kita keluar, sepatutnya dia dah ada semua PLOs tu. Tetapi sebenarnya when they start working, they have what we call first year work struggle. And in Australia, quite a lot of their university now adopting assessment, or they design their curriculum such that they pick up issue about first year working struggle ni, dia masukkan dekat dalam curriculum ni. Contohnya, katalah dalam engineering program, graduate yang keluar daripada engineering program, normally industri bagi tahu first year tu dia tak boleh ini. So benda yang dia tak boleh itulah yang universiti masukkan dalam curriculum, and benda itulah yang kita akan create assessment supaya we bridge the gap of the first year struggle. Okay, so saya rasa saya nak stop sampai situ dulu about digital assessment and the way forward. So I do hope that some of my sharing do have, do benefit some of you. And I would like to apologize for any inconvenience or for anything that is not right. You don't have to agree anything. You may adapt, and you can throw it away as much as you like. But all I'm saying is that when it comes to assessment, first of all, please check your assessment principles. Make sure that you know all the jargons. Please make sure that you know why you assess and what is it that you are trying to improve. At the end of the day, it's all about helping our students. When we talk about students, we are trying to help our children here. Okay, we are building nation. Okay, so we are creating all this authenticity, moving towards digital examination because this is their time, and it is not about us moving forward. Okay, to digital assessment. I think it's something that is not a choice, but it is something that we have to go for the sake of our children, because they are digital natives. So thank you so much. Tapi sebelum tu, kalau masih ada lagi Dr. Amer, yang tadi kita punya lecturer tu, yang share, kalau boleh share macam mana dia create authenticity ataupun macam mana dia create case tadi tu, we can pick it up from here lah. Maybe cara dia ada sedikit berbeza daripada apa yang saya share tadi.
I think it's from our friend from USIM, if not mistaken here, because we don't have the name here, just numbers.
Is she still around?
Yeah, if you're still around, maybe you can turn on your microphone and share something with us.
I'm still around. Can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Adlin. I'm actually a senior fellow because I'm from the industry. So that is why my approach has always been a bit different from my colleagues over here. And I chose to use case study, reason being that I discovered my students can do better, and they are not so tied up with the theories that we have. Yeah, right. So the only difference in Prof is that I added 2 elements, which is whereby not just asking about how to solve the problems or their opinion about the case study, but lastly, I will ask them, because I'm teaching marketing, right? How would you use this to this situation to attract Muslim customers or consumers, or in a different way, I can say if you were to open such a company, how would you market it to OIC countries? So that
So
is
yang
one
ni
part.
kiranya you are using personal authenticity and also impact on others, betul tak?
Yes, correct.
So you are using parameter number 5, but you are using at least 2 ways of parameter number 5. That is
Yes.
great. The only thing that I would like to pick up, if I may, when we are creating all this authenticity in our assessment, be it in a case based or in, obviously lah, kalau kita guna dalam examination, kita tak ada chance kalau guna dalam exam, sebab exam tadi kan masa dia pendek, tak ada feedback, tak ada apa. We lose the chance to help student to link subject content to the real world of work. Betul tak? Kalau macam case tadi. Sebenarnya kalau kita guna, let's say we design authentic assessment and with a digital assessment, salah satu aspek yang paling penting dekat sini ialah macam mana kita nak bantu student untuk link subject content to the case ataupun to the problem that we give our students. Most of the time in fact saya baru je lah bersembang raya haji ni dengan anak-anak saudara saya, dengan anak-anak saya. Actually quite a lot of students express their frustration that when lecturers giving them the case study, the project, assignment, students were left unsupported. Dan diorang tak tahu pun which part of the notes, which part of the lecturer's PowerPoint yang dia boleh attachkan kepada case itu. Because that process of linking subject content to the case or to the problem given to students need to be supported. Okay? Benda ni bukan sesuatu yang gifted to our children. So as a lecturer, I always remind myself, when I create all this kind of assessment, okay, be it physical or be it digital, support is prime. So kalau macam saya katalah saya bagi case macam doktor tadi you bagi case, apa saya buat ialah maknanya 2-3 minggu sebelum kena submit case itu ataupun sebelum student being interviewed as final exam for the case, apa saya buat ialah saya akan ada consultation slot dengan student, and during that consultation slot I actually have a video where I can show lah, tapi hari ni tak sempat kot. So dekat situ yang saya akan tunjuk dekat student, satu, macam mana dia perlu pakai assessment instruction yang saya dah bagi tadi tu, steps-steps yang saya dah letak dekat situ. Sebab sekarang nowadays if you notice kita punya new generation disebabkan oleh lodakan information ni, diorang macam dah tak perasan tahu instruction. So having to follow instruction is a problem actually yang sekarang ni kalau kita tengok. So all I'm saying is that we need to train them how to follow instruction. That is why we need to know how to write assessment instruction. Okay, secondly, we need to actually help our student or show to them how they can make use certain parts of the subject content or all parts of the subject content into the problem or into the case that we are talking about. Contohnya macam saya akan tunjuk, okay, slide ni, okay, konten dalam slide ni ada tak kaitan dengan contohnya case yang you tengah solvekan sekarang. Macam mana you nak gunakan this particular slide dalam case yang we are talking about. So during that consultation, that is the kind of learning discussion or feedback that we are having with our student lah. At least saya buat macam tu. Jadi lepas tu dalam masa yang sama, since they have to sit for interview as their examination, right, as their final examination. So masa consultation tu saya akan simulate the environment for the interview exam itu amongst my student. So meaning that I simulate how I throw questions to them and what kind of question that they might get, and they can rehearse what kind of answer they give, and based on their answer I will give feedback whether or not your answer will actually satisfy the rubrics or the criteria used for that particular assessment. So itu satu point lah yang saya rasa kita really kena strengthen lah kalau kita guna all this assessment, be it digital or not.
Yeah, Prof, I do understand what you're saying because that is exactly what I do too. You see, because whenever I go through any case study, they have got to discuss among themselves, and then after which I will guide them to actually what they need to answer. I mean, because sometimes they do it, orang kata we are going to give them about 10 marks, but the answer is insufficient. So I will instruct them how to actually get the information from the case study. So in a way, you say you have consultancy, but I do it in a very large group, and each group will come to me. And I mean, we have the whole thing. So there are maybe each group is made up of maybe 5 people. So they come forward to me, and we'll just discuss it together that way lah. That is how I feel lah, insyaAllah. So basically it's about the same lah, because kalau student dah ramai sangat, we cannot afford to do individually.
And in fact, just now I think people are concerned. Maybe orang akan tanya lah, Dr. Aishah, you student you berapa ramai yang you boleh buat macam tu? Actually student saya ramai. Tapi bila case student kita ramai, saya record consultation session tu, and then katalah saya ada 10 group, each group ada 5 orang, maknanya 50, ataupun saya ada 20 group. Okay, jadi saya the consultation tu bukan sometimes student sendiri dia decide lah. Macam hari tu dia also suggest sebab saya pun tak paksa student sangat, so saya cakap okay, group yang nak buat consultation come forward and book your time. So group yang nak consultation tu kita record, and then that will be shared to the rest of the group. So jadi the rest of the group will get an idea, walaupun dia tak hit kepada individual group problem, tetapi they will get an idea what the assessment is all about, and then how they will be interviewed, how they make use of subject content to the case or to the assessment that we give to them. So basically that is one of the tips lah, kalau siapa yang ada large classroom, sebenarnya not necessarily you conduct consultation ataupun session learning discussion dengan semua student, tetapi you can actually macam kita buat fokus. Kalau macam research kan, kita ada focus group interview. So basically we use the same approach lah for large classroom sebenarnya. Betul Doktor?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
So basically we give the students flexibility lah kan. You want to do consultation, just come over kan.
Yeah. Another, I think before we end, ada satu je last part yang saya ada flash masa awal-awal tadi, yang saya went through dengan UTM where we talk about way forward to digital exam. I also like you to start thinking of this mana tadi bukan alternative assessment, tetapi start thinking of saya tak paste flexible assessment. Pernah dengar flexible assessment? Flexible assessment ni maknanya student negotiate the assessment dengan, so kalau macam katalah micro credential, okay, micro credential tu walaupun kita dah fixkan dia punya assessment, tetapi sebenarnya there is another assessment yang sangat memerlukan digital assessment, and this type of assessment is what we call flexible assessment. So flexible assessment is the kind of assessment where student and the lecturer negotiated the assessment types and time. This is to make sure that that inclusivity is taken care of. Okay? Semua orang kena hantar by this. Tetapi kalau flexible assessment maknanya each individual will take the different component of the assessment of the subject tu at different time. Itu pun another challenge. But to do it digitally supaya kita tak lose track, and basically itulah in managing our flexible assessment. So itu pun salah satu avenue untuk kita berubah daripada traditional assessment kepada digital assessment. Okay. Okay, Dr. Amer, saya rasa mungkin kalau tak ada soalan lagi.
Alright, Prof. I think because
Thank you so much.
yeah, I think it's almost 12:30 dah. I think it's very enriching and interesting session given by you, Prof. Thank you very much. I think it helps a lot, especially for all academics who joining us today to have better understanding on digital assessment. It's actually way beyond that, isn't it? I think
yeah, way beyond what we used to, or way beyond what we thought we already experienced.
Yeah, so I think it is time for all of us, the academics, to move forward, okay? Because we are no longer living in the pre-COVID environment, which is everything is being done traditionally, kan? So it's time to move forward. Although I think most of the universities next semesters are going to have full 100% face-to-face lectures for next semester. I think digital assessment ini pun can be done even though kita buat lecture secara face to face. Like Prof mentioned, yeah.
Dia macam ni tau, digital exam ni sebenarnya dia tidak semestinya applicable bila kita buat online remote tau. Sebenarnya kalau misalnya session kita full face to face, apa yang kita maksudkan dengan digital exam ialah student akan still masuk exam hall, but the exam hall will be the exam hall will be equipped with internet and will be equipped with tables yang ada plug, sebab student will bring their own device. Maknanya semua student masuk exam hall dengan membawa dia punya laptop dan handphone, and the exam will be taken using their own devices. Pernah tengok tak senario ni? Kalau dekat luar negara ni biasa maknanya student masuk exam hall, dia bawa dia punya laptop, dia jawab soalan final exam itu dalam laptop dia tapi dalam exam hall.
I think other universities mungkin dah ada start buat macam tu. Mungkin ada full 100% lectures, tapi in terms of exam mungkin diorang dah ada start buat lah, tapi di sini belum lagi, Prof.
Lepas tu macam dekat UMP ada several fakulti dah start lah experimenting digital exam, where during the exam dia akan letak student dekat dalam dalam dia punya computer lab. Tetapi macam kami di UMP memang kita ada plan untuk student akan sit for dia punya digital exam using the BYOD method lah, bring your own device method. So sebenarnya when we talk about digital exam, dia tak semestinya online remote tau. So digital exam ni maknanya dia applicable untuk online remote dan juga untuk in person. So all the methods yang kita tengok tadi tu, macam mana nak design question dia lah, ini lah, itulah, semua applicable untuk konteks digital exam yang online remote ataupun physical sebenarnya.
I think what's interesting is that macam Prof mentioned tadi, going into digital assessment ni actually allows students to understand more and apply the real life situation lah, especially when we after they graduate nanti kan, rather than...
Sebab tu macam dekat luar negara tu bila dia buat examination yang macam biasa tapi student kena bawa laptop dia semua, sebab soalan dia tu soalan yang task based yang macam saya tunjuk tadi tu. Maknanya waktu exam dia duduk dekat dalam exam hall, bawa dia punya laptop, bawa dia punya handphone, tetapi soalan tu akan suruh dia, for example, perform the stress analysis just now. Kan? So basically that is what digital exam lah, walaupun student sebenarnya memang belajar face to face and sit for the examination in a physical punya manner lah. But that is what we call digital exam lah. So there's a lot of things that maybe we have to chew lah about digital exam ni.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your
Thank you
sharing
so
today.
much.
And we also like to thank all participants for being with us today, staying
Yep.
since 9 a.m. in the morning sampai sekarang. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much
Thank you.
for all your feedbacks, your views, and your sharing your experience with us. InsyaAllah, kalau ada ruang untuk kita jumpa lagi next time, we meet again in another platform, in another webinar. But before we leave, maybe we can ask all participants to open your camera for a quick photo session.
Nampak dah. Anak saya tu tak jauh daripada UMS sebenarnya.
Oh, di mana, Prof?
My eldest is di SMAC.
Oh, dekat sini pula. Okay, siapa yang ambil? Linda. Thank you very much, everyone joining. Not only from UMS, I think we have a few other friends from other universities as well, from USIM, UNIMAP pun ada.
Minta maaf kalau banyak kekurangan. Ada rahsia di sebaliknya.
Itu lebih dah, Prof.
Thank
Alright.
you.
Okay,
Terima kasih, Prof.
Thank you.
Okay. Boleh ambil gambar sekarang, Kak Linda?
Belum ambil gambar lagi?
1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you semua.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone, all participants. Terima kasih banyak, Prof, for sharing.
Thank you so much.
InsyaAllah jumpa lagi next session, insyaAllah.
InsyaAllah.
Take care. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.